Welcome to another camera comparison test. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Canon C200 versus the RED Helium. So a couple of weeks ago I teamed up with a friend of mine, Rubidium Wu from Crimson Engine, and we compared the Canon C200 with the Alexa Mini. If you guys did not watch that video, make sure to check it out. I will leave it linked down below in the description. This time around we've teamed up with another friend of mine, Carlos Quintero from Media 1Q, who actually owns a RED Helium. He has a lot of insight, so I thought it would be good to bring him in this project so that way we can do a more fair comparison. So these projects or these tests can take up a lot of time. They obviously cost a lot of money because we have to rent locations, we have to hire models. So a big shout out to magrents.com for sponsoring today's video. If you guys are looking to rent camera bodies, lenses, or any type of grip gear for your next project, make sure to check out magrents.com before you do any rentals because they have some of the best pricing I have seen. They also have some flash sales where you can get some ridiculous discounts. Their customer service is top notch. I really like working with them and I really thank them for sponsoring today's video. So one of the first things that I wanted to test out between the C200 and the RED Helium is the Colorscience. How do they compare, especially because I already own a C200? Can you match them up really well, especially since we did that comparison with the Alexa Mini? I've noticed that matching footage between the C200 and the Alexa Mini was such a breeze. So I wanted to see how it would compare to the RED Helium. Now, if you're familiar with RED, their footage seems very contrast, and a lot of the films that were shot on RED, I would say at least 80% of them are very dramatic, very high contrast. So what I did was I asked Carlos to color grade all of the RED footage for me and make it in a way where it is dramatic and high contrast and really push the color grade just like you would see it in a movie. And I wanted to see if I can match that with my C200, but I also asked him not to tell me the steps that he took to make it look like that just because I wanted to push myself. Now, just a little disclaimer, I am no expert in color grading, but I wanted to see how close and how easy it was to match the RED footage. So when I got the footage, I noticed that it was pretty dramatic, not something that I would do, but I tried my best to color match it. So I'll give you guys a quick steps of what I did to get it to look closer to the RED footage. So first of all, I dropped a LUT that Rubidium and I kind of put together, which is to match the footage from the C200 to the Alexa Mini. And that made a big difference. That actually balanced out the image quite well. So after that, like I said, RED footage is very contrast, very dramatic. So I literally took the contrast slider and I moved it all the way over to 100%. I made a couple of other tweaks and adjustments, and I noticed that it actually worked pretty well. It actually looked pretty similar, but there were some key differences. For example, we filmed that in an alley with no key light or anything like that. It was all natural light. So I noticed that her face was kind of dull compared to his. His was more alive, a little bit more vibrant, more punchy. So what I did was I created an adjustment layer and then I did a layer mask around her face, brought up the shadows, motion tracked that to make sure it would match whenever she moved. And then I noticed that her shirt was not the same as it was in real life. In fact, if you look at it from the C200, that's exactly what it looked like in real life. So I believe that Carlos adjusted the shirt to make it look more like a maroon color. So then what I did was I used secondary color to isolate her shirt, and then I used the color wheel to bring that all the way to green, made a couple of other adjustments to make it match more like the RED. And I'm gonna say, I think I probably did a pretty good job, got it to match about 95%. Now I will say that compared that to the Alexa Mini, the Alexa Mini on the C200 footage, in my opinion, was like a walk in the park. And I know there's been movies like Need for Speed, which they used a Canon C500 and they matched that with the Alexa, and the footage actually worked out really well. So I know that people have used Canon cameras, especially like the C-series line, to match it up with the Alexa Mini. Now that really wasn't the case for me with RED. Yes, you can get it to match, and by all means, I am no color grade expert, so I know that if you actually sent this out to somebody that knew what they were doing, they could probably match it much easier. But for me, it was not that easy and it was a little bit more challenging. Now, I'm not saying that you can't match C200 with RED, but it's a little bit more challenging. It takes a lot more finessing to do that. So if I was to pick one or the other, I'd actually prefer the Arri if I was gonna match it with my C200. Also, I like the image coming from the Alexa Mini more. I just feel that the image pops. It looks more, I hate to use the word cinematic, and I think that's the look that a lot of people are trying to strive for. So if I had to pick one, I actually prefer the Alexa Mini over the RED, and it's just so much easier to grade, and obviously it matches really well with the C200. Now, we didn't get to thoroughly test out the dynamic range on both of these cameras, mainly because, well, we just ran out of time. But I will say, in looking into some of the video samples that we had filmed, especially in areas where the background was just overexposed, like by a window, I did notice that the RED had better dynamic range, and it should because it does have 16.5 stops of dynamic range in comparison to the C200, which is only 13. Now, I do know that RED has this feature called HDRX, which essentially takes two exposures and you can make one basically like an HDR image, and that does give it an advantage over the C200. There are caveats, like you can't really use it in fast motion, a couple of other things, and I know Carlos is planning to do a video on HDRX, so when that video is live, I will make sure to leave it linked down below in the description so you guys can go ahead and check that out. Now, the biggest difference between the RED 8K Helium versus the C200 is obviously that 8K sensor. You're gonna get this 8K resolution that allows you to really do a lot more stuff in post-production by reframing. You can also go from a wide shot to a medium shot to a close-up without needing multiple cameras, literally just one camera, one take, which is very useful. And one of my favorite features is being able to actually punch in when trying to get critical focus and getting a full sensor readout one-to-one and seeing that image just looks awesome looking at it through the monitor in comparison to the C200, which actually does something more like a digital zoom. So I've owned a Canon C200 now for over a year, and I want to talk about things that I didn't like about using the RED in comparison even to the Arri Alexa Mini. So I noticed that with the Arri Alexa Mini and the C200, I felt that those two cameras are much more alike than the C200 and the RED. I feel like the RED and the C200 are literally polar opposites, where the Arri Alexa Mini and the C200 shared a lot of similarities. Even things like built-in ND filters that the C200 has, the Alexa Mini also has built-in ND filters. Little things that just kind of were much easier to work with the Arri Alexa Mini, or at least felt like home. Did not feel like that with the RED. So let's just start off just by trying to use a RED camera. Just booting it up takes about 1 to 2 minutes just to warm up and get going. And then if you want to black shade the sensor, which you really should, could take up to 5 minutes, sometimes even longer depending on the temperature. If you do that on the C200, if you black shade the sensor or black calibrate the sensor, that usually takes about 30 seconds on the C200, which is a massive difference. So before you can even get started on the RED, you're looking at about 10 minutes. So time is money. That's just things that you have to think about when you're dealing with production. The C200 has everything built in and comes with all of the accessories needed to get ready to shoot right out of the box. So you have built-in ND filters, built-in XLR inputs, you have a side handle that has different functionalities, you have an EVF. There's a lot of things that you would normally have to buy that on a RED that literally jack up the price. So you have a body that's $20,000 and you're gonna spend about another $20,000 just in accessories to make it very similar to a C200. Now, I understand there's gonna be people saying this is a completely different camera, and I get it. I understand that. But understand too that people are using REDs and C200s together, whether it be a C200 as a B cam or a C cam with the RED. So these are things that I think are very important to know if somebody's looking to buy a C200 as a B cam for the RED. Now, I think the biggest feature that the Canon C200 has compared to any other camera out there, with the exception of Canon's own C-series line, is dual pixel autofocus. Now, before you guys go crazy on the keyboard saying, you know, pros don't use autofocus, hear me out. I understand that there's a time and place for autofocus. Take, for example, right now. Yes, I can use this beautiful 50mm t1.3 wide open at t1.3 on my Canon C200. Here's the problem. If I have it open to 1.3, which right now I am using a 50mm 1.2, if I move 2 centimeters, I'm gonna be out of focus. Look what I can do now with dual pixel autofocus. I know that I'm gonna be in focus tack sharp. So if I was doing an interview right now and I wanted to make sure that I was in focus and I wanted to be wide open, I would just use dual pixel autofocus. I'm not gonna lose my manhood for using autofocus. It doesn't work that way. I know that if the talent is sitting here and they look over, I know that it's not gonna lose the focus because Canon's gonna remember the last place it saw its face. These are the benefits of using dual pixel autofocus. Like an interview like this or a talking head, there's no reason that I should be using something like this unless it was a stylistic choice with a lens. Other than that, dual pixel autofocus is awesome. What if there's a dancer that I needed to capture, that she's like, you know, moving around and I wanted to get a really shallow depth of field? There's just no possible way for me to be able to focus pull so quickly. The camera's making these micro adjustments at literally milliseconds is just impossible. These are things that I really appreciate having in a cinema camera, being able to use autofocus. Now I understand that's not gonna be for everybody, but I do feel that is a huge advantage over other cinema cameras. Now there's one big thing that the RED has that the Canon C200 just does not, and that's the perceived value. So when people see that you have a RED or you own a RED, automatically they think that your time, your production value is worth more than somebody with a Canon C200 or even a mirrorless camera. There is that value that you can obviously potentially charge more money because you're using more expensive gear. But I think that we live in a world now where things have changed. And I'm gonna use a quote from YouTuber Marques Brownlee, also known as MKBHD, which he says, "Cheap phones are getting good and good phones are getting cheap." I feel that also applies in the camera world. Like cheap cameras are getting good. So you have like obviously like the Sony A7 and the A6300. Those are like cheaper cameras that are just really good. You even have Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. Gosh, that's a mouthful. But you have cameras like that that are very inexpensive. And then you have really good cameras that are getting cheap. Like for example, like the C200 is a very inexpensive camera compared to what Canon cinema line used to cost before. Even RED has come down in price drastically compared to even what they were costing 3 or 4 years ago. So just keep that in mind when you're looking to buy or even rent a camera. Just because a camera costs $100,000 doesn't mean that you're going to get $100,000 worth of value. There is the law of diminishing returns. And I think we've kind of proved that with the C200 versus the Arri Alexa Mini. Yes, the Alexa Mini was better, but was it $65,000, $75,000 better? That's the point. And I kind of feel that's the same thing with even this test. Yes, the RED is better. Of course it is. But is it really worth $40,000 because that's the camera package that we use? It's a $40,000 camera package compared to a $7,500 C200. So that is my conclusion. I think all these cameras that we're comparing are great. There's not really one better than the other. There's one better for the job compared to the other. And that's really the takeaway. Which one is better for you? C200 is obviously gonna be better more for like a solo filmmaker, somebody that does documentaries. In fact, there's this documentary that won called Free Solo using a C300. They use a C300 because once again, everything is built in, it's easier to shoot with compared to all the other cinema cameras out there. It made more sense. They've used Canon C-Series line in movies like Need for Speed. They use, RED cameras for certain things. They use GoPros for, in areas where they just can't fit a cinema camera. So there's a camera for every situation. You just have to pick the right one for the job. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. My name is Armando. Thanks again for watching, and you will catch me in the next one. Adios. Make sure to check out magrents.com. They have some of the All right.